In the headlines, unfair and without proper justification. That's how government characterizes the EU's blacklisting of the country. Senior Counsel Anthony Astefan says the EU's blacklisting of Dominica is an affront to justice. And Dominica records a 97% increase in stay-over visitors for Mass Dominic 2019. I'm Andrea Louis with the Channel 5 News, back with the details after this.
Imagine you have Hollywood at your command. Introducing Flow Evil.
Red cheese, gold rings, all black, everything creeping through the night.
Anywhere you are.
Big girls don't scream hard like Halloween, make me feel alive.
There's a world of entertainment here, and you run the show. Flow Evil.
Here are some tips to reduce mosquito presence in and around your home. Keep water storage containers properly covered. Remove containers that can collect water from your surroundings. Keep garbage bins tightly covered. Pick up your litter and remove all tires from your yard. Keep gutters free of leaves and twigs to prevent stagnant water. Prevent Zika, Dengue, and Chikungunya. Fight the bite. This is a public service announcement from the Dominica Red Cross.
This message is supported by Flow.
Thank you for staying with us. First up, Senior Counsel Anthony Astefan and Opposition Leader Lennox Linton weighing in on Wednesday following the European Commission's decision to place Dominica on a list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions. Dominica, Barbados, Aruba, and Belize are among countries on the blacklist. A government press release says the move by the EU is unfair and without justification. It goes on to say government has complied with the EU's requirements and was placed on the blacklist while awaiting responses to its correspondence with the EU. Government also notes that in light of all the devastation from Hurricane Maria, the EU did not allow the country any more time to comply. The list, which appears to shame countries into compliance, has resulted in many jurisdictions changing their laws and tax systems to comply with international standards. The EU Commission assesses countries on tax transparency, good governance, and real economic activity, as well as one indicator, the existence of a zero corporate tax rate. It claims that 60 out of an original 92 countries have reportedly taken appropriate action and says the list has also had a positive influence on internationally agreed upon tax good governance standards. The Commission says its goal is to abolish harmful tax regimes and promote international standards on transparency and fair taxation. A letter will now be sent to all jurisdictions on the EU list explaining the decision and what they can do to be delisted. Leader of the parliamentary opposition, Honorable Lennox Linton, says the Roosevelt-Skerrit administration is to blame for Dominica making it on an EU blacklist.
Mr. Linton told Matt Peltier on Q95 Wednesday it all boils down to government's failure to follow through on its pledge to comply with EU regulations.
When you commit to doing what needs to be done so that you correct the things that cause you to be viewed or to be treated as harmful tax haven in the global community, when you commit to doing the things that will take you away from that status, then you have to be serious about it. Then you have to do what is necessary. It requires legislation. It requires the parliament to be meeting on a regular basis for both sides to agree on what needs to happen with amending legislation, with bringing in new legislation to put you in that position. We don't have a very active parliamentary agenda in Dominica. We don't go to parliament. We go to parliament 3 times a year. Notice what happens in other countries in the Caribbean that are not on the list. Like, for example, in the other OECS countries, we're the only OECS country on the blacklist. The other OECS countries have been taking their responsibilities seriously. They have been doing what they commit to do, and hence they have kept themselves off the blacklist.
Linton says Hurricane Maria is not a legitimate excuse for government's failure to comply with the EU requirements.
There were matters that were withdrawn. They noted that in the press statement as well. But the point of the matter is, Dominica is on the blacklist, and Dominica is on the blacklist because of the incompetence of this current administration. And that is why we need real change in Dominica, so that we get into government people who understand and accept their global responsibilities to do what they say they're going to do in enlightened global citizenship responsibility for good governance around the world. What's the story with those countries that were battered by both storms? Dominica had the worst of it. Yes, we agree. But Dominica cannot be using the excuse of Maria in 2017 to claim that what it had committed to do, it could not do. What do these legislative changes and practices have to do with Maria and reconstruction from Maria? Is Maria the reason why we've not been having regular meetings at the Parliament? No, Maria is not the reason for that. We have not had regular meetings at the Parliament before and after Maria. It hasn't changed. The pattern is there. 3 meetings a year. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to. Average 3 meetings a year since I have been in Parliament in 2015. So what is this excuse about Maria now? It doesn't cut it.
In related news, Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan says the EU placing Dominica on a so-called blacklist is an affront to justice and is manifestly unjust injustice inflicted on the government and the people of this country. Astafan says government has complied with every request for legislative amendments and information requested by the European Union.
There was nothing left for the government to do except be a party to the Convention on the Exchange of Financial Information, etc. Well, it turns out that the application by the government was made since May 2017, and the government's press release indicates that they wrote 3 or 4 letters in 2018 to the OECD to inform them what they've done in order to meet the requirements for the application and admission to the convention. And there was no response to the government's position and no granting of the government's application for over 2 years. This information, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and other members of the government had repeated, including the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, I understand, was in Romania, put this information across to the European Union Council of Ministers, and they shut their minds out to it. So Dominica is in the unfortunate situation having been put on a blacklist for something that they have no control over, which is the OECD accepting the application and granting the application of the government of Dominica to be part of the convention, bearing in mind that Dominica is not on any OECD blacklist and has complied with the regulations of the OECD.
Astafan says for anyone to blame government in light of these facts is dishonest.
This is a simple matter where legislation was put in place, amendments were put in place. During one of the parliamentary sittings, the leader of the opposition spoke his usual nonsense about government not knowing people and so on. I mean, the usual foolish statement. So he was there. The leader of the opposition was in the parliament when it was done. Parts of it were done. And it is indisputable that the financial secretary applied since May 2017 and wrote 4 or 5 letters, follow-up letters to the OECD. And in February or January this year, the government asked the European Union for an extension of time to get the consent from the OECD before putting Dominica on the blacklist. They were not willing to do that, but they were prepared to give exemptions to other European states and to others on the grey list. And they were even prepared to adjourn the meeting to accommodate the United Arab Emirates. But you see, Dominica don't have the money pull, the economic power pull. Because when they tried the same stunt with the United States told them, you can't do anything to me. We will do what we have to do and you do what you have to do. So it's very unfortunate what has happened to the country, but you accept the opposition in their usual dishonest way to celebrate anything that goes wrong, regardless of the fact that the government has done everything required of it by the European Union.
CARICOM Secretary General Erwin LaRocque says blacklisting amounts to a tax on the economies of small developing states like Dominica.
Ambassador LaRocque made the remark in his address at a conference on building resilience in Bucharest, Romania on Tuesday. While welcoming Romania's support for CARICOM's efforts at building climate resilience, Mr. LaRocque said there is an urgent need for the international community and international financial institutions to change the criteria for access to concessional development financing by middle-income small island developing states. Ambassador LaRocque said in seeking to reduce our vulnerabilities and build our economic resilience through diversification of our economies, financial services is a significant contributor to public finances in many CARICOM states. He said it is a source of funding for building resilience. He says it is now under threat as it confronts the unwarranted labeling of some of its countries as non-cooperative tax jurisdictions by the EU. He said the EU's actions are despite the fact that the countries in question are not designated as non-compliant by the relevant regulatory authorities such as the Financial Action Task Force and the OECD Global Forum. Ambassador LaRocque says while CARICOM states are supportive of global initiatives to promote tax good governance, they continue to be concerned about the lack of transparency, dialogue and consultation, to the extent of the reforms that have been demanded and the ambitious timeline for executing such reforms. He says even as we thank the EU for providing some assistance for disaster management strategy, ECOFIN appears bent on destroying our attempts to ensuring economic viability and thus the very efforts at building resilience. ECOFIN is the Economic and Financial Affairs Council. It's responsible for EU policy in three main areas: economic policy, taxation issues, and the regulation of financial services.
Italy and Estonia are blocking the inclusion of the UAE in an EU blacklist of countries which are deemed tax havens.
Reuters says foreign ministers were due to make a final decision on the issue on Tuesday. The 28-nation EU set up the blacklist after revelations of widespread tax avoidance schemes used by corporations and wealthy individuals to lower their tax bills. Blacklisted jurisdictions face reputational damage and stricter controls on their financial transactions with the EU, although no EU sanctions have yet been agreed by European states. Last week, EU states blocked the adoption of another blacklist of countries that show deficiencies in countering money laundering and terrorism financing after pressure from Saudi Arabia, the United States and Panama. At a closed-door meeting on Friday, the Italian representative said the UAE should be given until the end of this year to change its rules and comply with EU tax standards. Italy said the UAE, a federation of emirates which include the top financial hubs of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, had constitutional constraints that justified its delay in changing rules. Most of over 60 jurisdictions monitored across the world by the EU were given 1 year until the end of 2018 to comply with EU standards and avoid being blacklisted.
You are watching the Channel 5 News. Stay tuned for more after the break.
Imagine you have Hollywood at your command. Introducing Flow Evo.
Red jeans, gold rings, all black, everything creeping through the night.
Anywhere you are,
Big girls don't scream hard like Halloween, make me feel alive.
there's a world of entertainment here, and you run the show. Flow Evo.
Les moun ki ni TB estene e ben tousse, moun ki en bonne santé oli wen ka respire se vermine la. Moun ki pani bon tempérament kon sa ki ni maladie HIV, alcool, ka fume, ti mamay e grand moun bien sensible pour ces maladies ça là. Moun ki ka tousse ni pou prendre précaution le yo en parmi moun en place publique. Couvre bouche ou le ou ka estene tousse. Visiter docteur e ben place santé yo. Fini tout traitement yo ba ou sa joine guérison et puis maladie TB. En responsabilité ou aider du bout sime maladie TB et HIV. Protéger corps et les autres.
Welcome back. Dominica is reporting a 97% increase in stayover visitors for Mass Dominique 2019. That's according to Minister for Tourism and Culture Robert Tong. Speaking to the media on Wednesday, Tong explained that the country has been more rigorous in its marketing strategy and this is yielding results.
2017 for Carnival, we had about 1,700 visitors coming in for that particular season, that 1 week season. 2018 it was about It's a little bit less, a little lower than 1,007. And for 2019, we had over 3,000 people. We had a 97% increase. So Dominica is moving in the right direction. We just have to make sure we continue doing it smart, we continue doing it well. And when people come to Dominica, what we've been saying you're coming to see, we have to deliver on it. So we say we're going to give you great service, you have to receive great service. We say it's a green and clean island, we have to continue making sure our island is clean and green. We all have a responsibility.
Tong also noted that compared to other countries struck by a Category 5 hurricane just under 2 years ago, Dominica is doing very well in tourist arrivals.
In the fourth quarter, we've done pretty well with our state of tourism, whereas many countries have, if you look at the statistics, many countries that got impacted by a hurricane, Category 5 storm, it normally takes about two years to 3 years to get back on track. And if you look at the numbers compared to ours, whilst many of them are experiencing like a 30 to 40% decline in stable visitors, at the end of 2018, we are actually down by only 12%. So I think Dominica, well, I know Dominica has done pretty well. We also use these strategies based on Independence and Creole Festival to advise our people to come back home and help your people come back home and see Dominica and also bring friends with you. And it continues to work.
The tourism minister says the country has become more specific in its marketing campaign, and this is bearing fruit.
Recently, we've been very specific with the type of promotion that we're doing. Dominica is a country of great natural resources, the diversity in terms of diving, our nature, our heritage. So these are the things that we really try to promote. We're not promoting Dominica as a white sand type of beach kind of destination, and that's why even when we use our social media, we're using something called analytics. So analytics allows you to pinpoint the people who are in tune with what you have to offer. That allows us to improve on our not on our spend, but on our results, because you don't want someone seeing our advert who's interested in a white sand beach and partying. Obviously, he's not going to be interested, and every image that you put out there costs. So by doing that, it allows us to better control our spend and get better results as a result of that.
Still with tourism, Dominica's forts are among the highlights of a documentary produced by a regional filmmaker. Patrick Bousselet, based in Martinique, recently released his latest production titled The Secrets of Caribbean Fortresses 2, in which Dominica's Fort Shirley in Cabrit, Portsmouth, and the fort in Scottshead are featured. Bousselet, whose work has received good reviews at regional film festivals, believes it is important that youth are more aware of their history as a Caribbean people.
I think it's very important to speak about for young people and people in the Caribbean and international, because my documentary go in different festival, international festival. This documentary is a second part. I make a first documentary about fortresses, last year second part, because I travel a lot in Caribbean to learn the history of the Caribbean.
Bousselet, who has a deep love for the Caribbean's rich history, already has his next project in the pipelines.
Now I make a new documentary in progress about church and cathedral in Caribbean. Because I think the edifice, the building are beautiful. It's not a documentary about religion. It's not religion. C'est architecture and history of the different churches in Caribbean. Because I think it's also important to speak about history, because when I travel in different islands, I see a lot of tourists visit the churches.
Here's an excerpt of The Secrets of Caribbean Fortresses 2.
Fort Shirley in Dominica is located on a peninsula just to the north of Portsmouth. It housed a British garrison in the 18th century, which comprised 50 buildings and almost 600 men, with their support staff, artisans, and slaves. The angle of the ramparts of Fort Shirley and the line of cannons were aimed principally to cover the entrance on the seaside and the central part of the bay. Scott's Head Fort is on a small peninsula with a promontory that extends towards the west of the village at the southwest point of Dominica. It was named after Colonel George Scott, who became Lieutenant Governor of Dominica from 1764 to 1767. He supervised the building of the fort, the major part of which collapsed from the cliff into the sea.
Minister for Tourism and Culture Robert Tong says documentaries like these help Dominica's tourism product and committed his ministry's assistance to boost Les filmmaking ventures where possible.
Dominica has many beautiful churches, and I'm sure that his new documentary will showcase some of those. And as he said, when once persons see these films, hopefully they'll be enticed to want to come to Dominica to experience what we have to offer. One way to reduce costs might be to partner with local film producers, so that way you don't necessarily have to travel to the respective islands all the time. They might be able to do some of the work for you and make your life a little bit easier. As you can well imagine, having to travel to all of these islands is a significant cost and obviously very time consuming. So that might be definitely one way to work together and partner with our local persons to make your job a lot easier.
Following the documentary on Caribbean churches and cathedrals, Boosler plans to do a film on the way of life of the Caribbean people between 1860 and 1960. And the people of Layu and environs can expect to see a fully operational emergency shelter and resource center before the peak of the 2019 hurricane season. This as the Layu Resource Center and Emergency Shelter construction project is entering its final phases. The project, funded to the tune of $2.2 million through a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank, began in March 2018. The initial end date for the project was March 2019, but this has been pushed back by 3 months as the original design was reworked to make the structure even more resilient. Owner of Royce Real Estate and Construction, which is contracted to do this project, says the structure was already in keeping with Dominica's building codes, but reinforcement plans were needed to ensure the building is both earthquake and hurricane resistant.
Sourcing the material was one of the hiccups that we had, and the changes in the scope of the building was one of the areas we also had some delays. The way the design was structured, I think after they realized that it was somewhere too weak because of, you see, especially in these days, you're talking about resiliency, climate change. So they had to make some changes based on that, and that caused the delay of the thing. Because you see, you have a consultant who has to review from time to time. And as they go along, they might see a flaw, they might have to correct. So correcting a flaw, it might just take one day, it might probably take a few weeks. So time they revise and then pass it on back to the contractor. It takes about 3-4 weeks.
When completed, the building will house 2 large halls, one on each floor, a kitchen, laundry room, staff room, washrooms, and storage units. Project manager Ian Williams gave a synopsis of what has been going on at the site since March 2018.
We have completed the substructure, which is the foundation to the ground floor. We have erected the steel frame members, as you can see. So basically that's where we are. We have had to put in some rough electricals and rough plumbing, and that's as far as we are right now. Well, we are just getting ready to put the deck sheets so that we can put in the floor and the roof. So we are now in the process of putting the external walls.
The Resource Center and Emergency Shelter sits on approximately 8,000 square feet of land. The structure will have 3 different sources of power and a backup water system. Foreman on the project, Liston John Baptist, says currently 19 people are employed on the site with hopes of increasing to almost 30 employees.
We all like today we saw 2 new faces. Yesterday we had 2 new faces, and we're expecting to bring in some more tradesmen because there's a lot of blocks going up right now. So we are trying to improve the workforce and the hours. We're having more hours on the job to get the job done. As you can see, it's really resilient because you could see the structure, you could see the steel frame, you can see how huge the beams are. You know, it's really a resilient, you know, building because we have the 8-inch block coming around the perimeter again. You know, a lot of reinforcement, the steels, huge steel, 1-inch steel, 3/4-inch steel, half-inch steel. So you know, we're looking forward for really something that will withstand earthquake, heavy wind, you know, hopefully.
The new deadline for completion of the Layu Resource Center and Emergency Shelter, which is expected to house close to 200 people, is June month-end.
Imagine you have Hollywood at your command. Introducing Flow Evo. Anywhere you are.
Big girls don't scream hard like Halloween, make me feel alive.
There's a world of entertainment here, and you run the show. Flow Evo.
Here are some tips to reduce mosquito presence in and around your home. Keep water storage containers properly covered. Remove containers that can collect water from your surroundings. Keep garbage bins tightly covered. Pick up your litter and remove all tires from your yard. Keep gutters free of leaves and twigs to prevent stagnant water. Prevent Zika, Dengue, and Chikungunya. Fight the bite. This is a public service announcement from the Dominica Red Cross.
This message is supported by Flow.
To end the news, the headlines again. Unjust and without proper justification. That's how government characterizes the EU's blacklisting of Dominica. Senior counsel Anthony Astefan says the EU's blacklisting of Dominica is an affront to justice. And Dominica records a 97% increase in stay-over visitors for Mass Dominique 2019 compared to the previous year. Feel free to contact us at news@marpin2k4.com. You can also access or pass the newscast on our YouTube channel. On behalf of the entire production team, I am Andrea Lee, and to all of our viewers around the world, thank you so much for watching. Join us tomorrow.